Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is Victoria Rutherford with Adelaide Capital. I'm really excited for our BYOB today. I'm joined by 5 clean tech executives who are going to help us better understand what's new in the space. We're going to chat about each of their businesses, as well as current trends, new technologies, government regulations, as well as the challenges and opportunities that have arisen from COVID-19. So we'll spend the first part of the hour addressing the topics I just mentioned above. There is going to be an audience Q&A. So if anyone has a question as we go along, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and you can simply input your question there. If we don't get to it right away, we will circle back to it. So you can add one at any time throughout the presentation. I just want to remind everyone that we do host our BYOB event in a partnership with Food Banks Canada. So we do encourage everyone to make a donation. And with that, we're going to meet our panelists. So I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves one by one. It's probably easier that way. If each panelist could introduce themselves, their company, and then just quickly outline the efficiencies and clean perspective of their technology. And we're going to try to keep each intro to a minute or less. Audrey, we're going to start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Audrey Massacre, Ennis, and I'm President and CEO of Questor Technology. We're listed on the venture under QST, and Questor has patented technology that has been ISO certified, verifying that we're able to take any waste gas stream, combusted at 99.99% efficiency so that there's zero harmful pollutants. The big game changer with this technology is our ability to take methane, which is 86 times worse than CO2, and eliminate it. So a project in Mexico, for example, for $8.5 million, we're able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at 450,000 tons. So less than $2 a ton cost. We've got around 30 million of revenue, and we work globally. Probably 95% of our revenue is now in the United States and Mexico and Canada, but we're looking to continue to grow. Thank you.
Okay, Barry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Barry Poe, and President of Connected Solutions and mCloud's Chief Marketing Officer. mCloud is really a company that's listed on the TSXV, an IoT, AI, and cloud company that's really focused on using AI to solve some of the world's most challenging energy problems. So we use AI today to curb energy waste in buildings, maximize the energy production of wind turbines, and extend the lifespan of critical energy infrastructure in a variety of different industries. Today, we're connected to about 7,000 buildings all around the world. We help businesses save about 120 million kilowatt hours in energy every year, and that's the equivalent of 80,000 tons of greenhouse gases emitted every year. So really excited to be here on the panel.
Okay, Bill. Oh, Bill, you're on mute.
Yes, I didn't hear you say my name. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Bill Crossland, President and CEO of Thermal Energy International, which is an established supplier of proven energy efficiency and emission reduction solutions to the industrial and institutional sectors. Our reason for being, the why we're in business, is we make our customers more competitive and improve their bottom line by saving them money, reducing their fuel use, and cutting their carbon emissions. And we do this by working with our customers as partners to design, develop, and implement customized turnkey energy efficiency solutions based on our own proprietary technologies. Our customers are typically large multinationals, often with tens, if not hundreds of sites around the world. We work in a variety of sectors: food and beverage, pharmaceutical, healthcare, chemical, plastics, rubber, pulp and paper, to name a few. But probably food and beverage and pharmaceutical and healthcare are by far our top 3. And it's by providing a unique mix of proprietary products together with customized engineering that Thermal Energy is able to deliver compelling financial and environmental solutions and benefits for our customers. So even with today's energy prices, which have come down an awful lot over the last 5 to 10 years, we can deliver projects with simple paybacks of sort of in the 2 to 5 years, which range, which is a small fraction of the sort of 30+ year useful life of our equipment. Our 5-year compound annual growth rate on revenue is about 30%, and we've achieved this growth with our own cash. We haven't gone back to the markets, so we've done it all with our own internal cash flow. On an LTM basis, we're at about $22 million in revenue, $1.5 million EBITDA, and about $300,000 in net income and growing. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Dan?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan Blondell, CEO of Nano One Materials. We are listed on the Venture Exchange under the ticker NNO. And our focus is on the development of cathode materials used in lithium-ion batteries. So we are developing ways to improve the cost structure of these materials and the performance and, let's say, the longevity that would result in a lithium-ion battery. The applications for our materials across the full spectrum of lithium-ion batteries and applications. So these would be batteries used in consumer electronics, electric vehicles, industrial applications, energy storage applications for renewables, wind, solar, etc. We're in a pre-revenue stage. We're well financed. We've got about a 4-year runway, and we are partnered with companies like Volkswagen and are working actively with a number of their peers in space. I'll leave it there.
Ron?
Thanks, Vic. Hi, my name is Ron Hosjan. I'm the VP Finance and Chief Financial Officer of Arius Energy. We're a Canadian private company providing water management solutions for the oil and gas industries as well as other municipalities throughout North America. We provide innovative technology-based environmental solutions that help cut clients, reduce costs, enhance energy efficiencies, reduce emissions, and conserve use of water. We have operations in Alberta, BC, Wyoming, Colorado, Texas, and New Mexico currently.
Okay, so let's get started. So I just wanted to touch on a misconception that I typically hear is that people associate clean tech with additional costs that might cut margins. However, often it's usually the opposite. So I was hoping that you guys could speak to some of the cost savings that companies might have when applying your technologies. I was going to start with Barry.
Yeah, it's actually a really good question, Victoria. You know, when we go into a lot of restaurants in particular, especially now in kind of the age of COVID-19, there's always kind of a hesitation when you kind of come in initially, because a lot of these customers are saying, well, hey, you know, aren't we taking on a new expense by bringing in some new technology? And what we've often had to do is really help these customers understand that there's a huge benefit to their bottom line when you're taking a look at what we can do to look at ways to make their businesses more efficient in terms of how they operate day to day. Sometimes to the point at which, you know, we're also helping them not just be more efficient, but look at ways in which they can engage with their customers in new and different ways. And so through these technologies, it's not just kind of an expense, it's actually an investment in improving the customer experience for a lot of these businesses, as well as ways to make sure that they're not spending more money than they need to. So in addition to kind of being more sustainable and helping them be more sustainable, we're also helping them run a kind of a more efficient business as a result.
Okay, Bill, did you want to touch on this as well?
Yeah, well, it is frustrating what you're touching on, because it isn't more expensive; it's more cheaper. It is cheaper. I've looked at a study that McKinsey and Company did, and they looked at the cost per ton of carbon abatement. You know, and then they had a graph that showed the cost per ton of all these different abatement measures. And what the frustrating thing is, a lot of times people think when they think of clean tech, they think of renewable energy. And renewable energy historically has costed more than traditional energy. But even if it doesn't, if you're replacing traditional energy with renewable, it's an investment that you have to make. If you're actually helping a company reduce their energy, save money, improve their bottom line, not only are you reducing carbon emissions, but there's a net negative cost to that. You're actually saving them money. And so I think there's a lot of misconception around in the industry about clean tech and that it's so much more expensive, where a lot of our technologies here that we're talking about today not only save the environment, but make our customers more profitable and save them money. Everything we do is done on a payback. I mean, it would be nice to think that a lot of companies want to reduce their carbon emissions for the good of the planet, but at the end of the day, it always comes back to a return, and that's how we sell our product.
Okay, any of the other panelists want to add to that point? Audrey?
Yeah, so to give you a perfect example, so in Colorado and North Dakota, because they have tough rules on emissions, if they don't meet the emissions, they actually have to curtail their oil production. So in Colorado, for a rental cost of around $1,000 a day, my clients are able to increase their oil production 400 barrels a day. And assuming roughly a $50 net back, that's $20,000 a day of extra revenue. In North Dakota, it's around 2,000 barrels a day or $100,000. So right away, you see that it's a better practice. In addition, in Colorado, because they have so much pushback from communities, we create an opportunity to create the win-win with industry and community so that they're not fighting in court. And at the end of it, some of the projects we're doing in Mexico, our carbon tax in Canada and in Mexico is over $20 a ton. We're able to reduce it to less than $2 a ton. So once again, great return on investment. So, you know, it's a misconception. Most people think right away, oh, if I deploy clean tech, it's going to cost me. But time and time again, we show a return on that investment that is quite significant.
And then Ron, I saw you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, as a lot of our viewers know, in the oil and gas industry, as commodity prices are fluctuating up and down, the low-cost producer typically is the one that survives. And, you know, at Arius, we have proprietary patented technology that allows customers not only to conserve water, but reduce their water costs. So in the Permian, for example, an average well will take about 500,000 barrels of water during fracking operations. And we can reduce customers' costs by 30 to 40% by using our technology to reuse that water many times. I mean, you could use the same 500,000 barrels for a 10-well program, and not only are you conserving water, but you're significantly reducing their costs as well. So, yeah, there is a misnomer out there that clean tech is more expensive, but as you can tell by all of our examples, that's not the case.
And so another topic that comes up. Oh, sorry, Dan.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add on to that, if you don't mind. At Nano One, of course, we're focused on lithium-ion battery cathode materials, and there's a whole bunch of different flavors that go into different kinds of lithium-ion batteries. What we're seeing is tremendous pressure, of course, coming from the automotive industry mostly to drive down costs. And so, you know, a big part of what we bring to the table is cost reduction. We also working on performance, improving the overall performance of the battery. But the cost reductions they're about reducing the capital costs of the equipment and the manufacturing process, and reducing the, of course, all the inputs like power, and also using lower cost streams of product that go into making these materials. So the industry is looking, you know, very, very carefully at these kinds of things and looking for cost savings all over the place. So, you know, it's obviously a very important part to our business plan, and we've done some fairly extensive sort of engineering plans to describe plants that can help reduce costs at the battery level and ultimately at the OEM level, the auto manufacturers are looking for.
Okay, thank you. Barry, so you touched on this point a little bit when you were just talking about, you know, having to go in and educate the client. And so something else that comes up quite frequently is the adoption cycles of clean tech. And so typically it takes a longer time because whether you need to educate the consumer or they think that there's going to be a higher CapEx upfront spend to implement the technology. So I was wondering if you guys could each maybe touch on adoption cycles and how that's been trending over time for your business. Barry, do you want to maybe start?
Yeah, you know, I would say that one of the barriers to entry is kind of the CapEx discussion. So when you go to a customer and you say, hey, you know, you'd like to bring in new technology, one of the things they're always concerned about is how much is this going to cost? And so one of the things we do at mCloud is we've got a software as a subscription-based model. So recurring multi-year subscriptions is the way in which we deliver our solutions to customers, and that allows us to amortize the cost of an implementation over some multi-year kind of period of time. What that means for the customer, though, is that they don't have to have the outlay of capital upfront. So in terms of being able to get into some of these businesses where there's a little bit of education that's required, really good way to educate the customers to make it really easy for them to say yes to something. And that's what we do in a lot of these buildings that we go into, is we'll kind of come in and we'll say, hey, and it's very easy for you to get started. Why don't we come in, do a couple of buildings for you, a couple of your spaces, and then let's take a look at the results. And then once you've got some measurable return on investment that they can see, the next buildings become easier. And so that's been kind of a good pathway for us in terms of our own growth, has been to just make it really easy for customers to get engaged. Once they start seeing the measurable results, it becomes easier to grow within those customer bases.
Audrey, did you want to touch on this as well?
Yeah, so the oil and gas industry, of course, really struggles. That's our primary client. So what we offer them is this opportunity around rentals and sales. And similar to Barry, once you rent our units, we end up a lot of times getting a chance to end up selling them. The other part that drives our business is also the tough rules on emissions. And you can see the carbon tax, the tough rules. Everyone's looking for ways to reduce emissions in a cost-effective way. So we provide probably one of the most efficient, inexpensive ways to do that. And investors are now saying that, capital isn't going to go to a company that isn't creating a pathway on how they're going to reduce emissions. So it's creating a great opportunity for us, and we've seen significant growth. And of course, you will have recently seen the Canadian federal government announcement of $750 million that will go to methane reduction technology. So we're really hoping that pushes adoption more. A lot of times companies are afraid to adopt for fear it'll set a precedent.
Yeah, okay. I would say I agree with Barry. I mean, anytime you're selling a CapEx, a capital expenditure, there's a challenge to that. It's not a consumable, and and we follow the same sort of strategy, giving them something that's easy to say yes to. Our projects are fairly large, sort of $1 million, so we can't do one for free. But part of the strategy, and I mentioned that most of our clients are large multinationals, to try and speed up that adoption and shorten the sales cycle. We focus on large multinational companies that have multiple sites. So we have a long sales cycle for the first one. Once they like us and they've seen it, then the next site and the next site and the next site after that are much, much faster. And that's part of our strategy.
And so just, I guess, elaborating on that topic. So some of the partnerships in this group is actually quite impressive. So I know that we have, Barry, you guys have partnerships with Bank of America and Starbucks, and Dan, Nano One with Volkswagen. So can we just maybe talk a little bit about how the sales cycle changes when you are dealing with such large customers? Dan, do you want to start?
Sure. The sales cycle is certainly very challenging in the battery space. Batteries are extremely complex devices. Chemically, there's a very complex supply chain that goes into making these batteries, and really it all starts with an evaluation process. So we have chemicals that go in the battery, and they need to be tested at a laboratory cell level, and then a pilot cell level, and ultimately a full-scale sort of product model. And that can take many months and even longer than that to go through those evaluation cycles to sort of gain confidence in the materials. And then we have to do that multiply with many, many players and build a sort of credibility across the space. It's taken certainly quite a few years to get us to that point, but we do have that credibility in place now, and it has enabled us to put deals together with the companies like Volkswagen. We started working with Volkswagen in the summer of 2018. And that led to an agreement with them in June of last year. So that took about 9 months. That is apparently quite fast. And then we've been working with them on advanced cathode materials for lithium-ion batteries, improving the longevity, durability, and safety of those materials in lithium-ion batteries. And that's been another 9 months. Almost 12 months since then. So these are long sales cycles. It takes a long time to build the credibility, get the evaluations in place, get their level of confidence up. But that's kind of the space we live in, and that's how batteries sort of come to be.
Barry, do you want to maybe touch on Bank of America and Starbucks and just the sales cycle with those customers?
Yeah, just the comment that I made a little earlier that the first yes is always the hardest. I think rings true when you're talking about companies like Bank of America, Starbucks, and any of our larger kind of enterprise customers. You definitely, when we've gone into a lot of these businesses, like Dan kind of mentioned, credibility is very important. So today we're in Bank of America and kind of 3,300 branches all across the United States. So if you walk into a Bank of America branch today, you're actually being managed using mCloud's technology in terms of your comfort and energy efficiency. So the bottom line for Bank of America is that we were able to reduce their facility operation costs by about 12%. So that's about $40 million Canadian for them every year. And so, when we get into one of these branches or buildings in an enterprise location where we're new, what's really important is establishing criteria and metrics for success that we can rely on to be able to go back and build a stronger business case for why a wider rollout is warranted. And so, once we've got that in place, then the rollout is actually pretty straightforward. Then the question then becomes, well, how quickly can you do this? And so then it ends up being more a question of delivery than spending time in the sales cycle. And that actually kind of success begets success. So, when we go out to other customers, they'll want to know who else we worked with. And being able to say that we work with all these different marquee brands is very helpful because it means that, there's more credibility that we can bring to the table. So it's really easy. It's easier, at least, to have a conversation about what we can do for them and their business.
Okay, so I just wanted to jump on to some themes. I wanted to start talking about government regulations. And so, Audrey, you had just mentioned about the Government of Canada just announcing the $750 million emission reduction fund. And so could you maybe elaborate on that just a little bit more? Do we know anything yet about how these funds are going to be allocated? And is there going to be a direct impact to Questor? Do you guys know yet?
Well, there's not a lot of information out on the 750 million, but what we've gathered is it's going to be allocated to projects that, of course, show the biggest reduction for the lowest cost. It is focused on adoption and technology that's ready to go and can be deployed. And our understanding is 75% of it will be a loan and 25% and repayable, and 25%, of course, will be in the form of a grant. We're looking to be proactive. It'll have a big impact on Questor because we have the ability to influence emissions from the time the well is drilled all the way to its processing, gathering, transportation, delivery to the consumer, and the final abandonment. So we touch all sides of it, and we happen to be one of the most effective ways to reduce methane. In addition, we're able to, with other technology we have, take the waste heat, generate power, use that waste heat to treat water, use it for energy efficiency. And right now, the 750 million is focused on oil and gas, but we're also seeing other industries like wastewater treatment plants, landfills, et cetera, looking to apply and deal with the methane in that area as well. So we're quite excited about it. We've already had clients approach us interested in seeing if there's an opportunity to partner with us to access some of those funds.
Ron, so I just wanted to talk to you on the water side a little bit. So obviously in Canada, we have a lot of regulation in terms of water usage and streams. In the US, we don't have as much or any. What could that mean for Aureus if the US started implementing more regulation in terms of water usage?
Yeah, no, you're correct, Victoria. The US is quite a ways behind Canada as far as water regulations. Not only do they not have water regulation, there is a water shortage in a lot of the areas that we're operating in. So, being the low cost provider in our space, we use our proprietary technology allows us to treat the water. 90% of the treatment is done through our process, so we end up using quite a bit less chemicals. Those are two reasons why any kind of regulatory changes in the U.S. would significantly increase our revenue stream in the U.S. And that's effectively why we took this technology into the Permian here just a few months ago.
Okay, and then, so given what we've been seeing with COVID-19, do we think that the governments are going to ease up on some of their carbon reduction timelines to give industries a break who have been struggling? So it seems like the airlines and the automakers have already been lobbying governments. Dan, I thought maybe you could walk us through what you've been hearing on this front and if you think there's going to be any implications to your business from the auto side.
Well, I certainly have been hearing the same things that you have been hearing, but at this point, I don't believe it's going to have a material impact on the adoption of, let's say, electric vehicles and obviously the batteries that go in them. We've seen fluctuations in that over the last few years. In terms of policies, in terms of oil prices, and actually the demand for electric vehicles has gone nothing but up. So I think there's plenty of demand to go around for the foreseeable future in our space, certainly. So we're anticipating nothing but kind of blue sky on that front.
Okay, and so just maybe staying on the COVID theme. So Barry, in a post-COVID-19 world, I guess I would expect there to be a way higher focus on air quality, especially air quality within buildings. So how does this play into mCloud and some of the solutions that you guys are offering to customers?
Yeah, it's an interesting opportunity for a company like mCloud to be in this space today, because there are actually a lot of companies out there who are very concerned about reassuring their customers and their teams that their establishments are safe to be in. And what's funny about this is kind of a really neat intersection between health, safety, and clean tech. Is indoor air quality is important. And in fact, you'll find that many buildings actually have the opportunity to install indoor air quality CO2 sensors, which are often used kind of traditionally in these buildings to ensure that we've got a pretty good sense of how these buildings are being used and to drive better energy efficiency. Well, it turns out that these same sensors that you're using for indoor air quality measurement for energy efficiency will also be the same sensors that help make sure that you've got clean air and proper ventilation in your building to avoid people being infected by viruses like COVID-19. And so there's actually a really interesting intersection there between these kinds of technologies. And that's a big opportunity for us, because we can help these businesses make sure that they're reassuring their customer bases and at the same time provide them with better energy efficiency as a result. So it's kind of a neat kind of combination of the two.
So I guess another sector, while oil and gas has obviously been hit particularly hard with the demand destruction that we've seen from COVID-19. So could we maybe just spend a minute with the companies that are, more focused on the oil and gas area and just talking about, what you guys are seeing, how it's affecting your business? Is this creating opportunities for your team to go in and maybe sell some of your products? Audrey, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so certainly we've seen a lot of lobbying to roll back some of the environmental reporting and rules. But what's interesting, and we do a lot of work in the US, what we're starting to see is each of the individual states are very focused on air quality. So a lot of our work in the US is driven more so from air quality and the tough standards. So unlike the water world, the US is actually ahead of Canada on air quality and emission regulation, and it's actually very, very strict depending on the state. So each state has continued to put in tough rules. Pennsylvania has just announced some very, very tough rules that companies are looking to meet. So it's an area that we're starting to continue to be very active in. But what we're seeing in Canada certainly is a rollback, but Canada's focus is a lot on climate change. They know that investment isn't coming into the oil and gas industry in Canada. And so that was one of the reasons they put the $750 million in place around methane to try and help Canada meet its goals and targets, because we have fallen a fair ways behind. So we know that investors are really pushing the oil and gas industry to deal with emissions. So even though COVID has created some struggles on their balance sheets, they know to attract capital, they've got to show a solid plan on how they're going to transition and deal with the emission side.
Ron, did you have anything to add? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all my colleagues have experienced this when their technology was new. It's always tough getting your customers to buy into new technology. The thing I'm most excited about at Arius is we are the low-cost water treating option for the Permian and New Mexico area. So as a result, when oil's at $60 or $70, companies are less focused on maybe cost, more focused on doing the same thing they did over the last 2 or 3 quarters to execute production growth. When you're in a lower price environment like we are in, companies will be a little bit more focused on reducing their costs, and in a lot of cases that means they're more interested in trying new technologies to that might help them reduce those costs and make their economics go around at a $30 oil price, whereas maybe under older technology that wasn't the case.
And then I did just want to touch really quickly before we move to audience Q&A. So Dan, in a post-COVID world, as we may see people move further away from public transportation and wanting to drive their own vehicles more, how do you think this trend is going to affect Nano One?
That's a very interesting question. I guess that remains to be seen how that'll all play out. Regardless of the type of transportation they're going to be taking, they all require energy, and we're seeing overall a trend towards electrifying that transportation, whether that be a consumer electric vehicle or a bus or a train. We're seeing those trends worldwide. So from our business point of view, it doesn't matter what you're electrifying, it still requires energy. You still need to move that mass around, and it's still going to require batteries to move them, or something on the grid, anyways, to move that around. So in the end, I don't think it has a big impact. If we move to more electric vehicles, personal vehicles, it will result in more batteries being deployed and sitting idle in driveways. And so that's probably good for our business in the end. But from a sustainability point of view, I'd rather see those batteries being used more efficiently on a day-to-day basis, more than half an hour. I'd like to see those cars being shared. I'd like to see it in electric buses where public transportation is using those resources that are tied up in batteries more effectively day-to-day, hour-to-hour. But by and large, it's all moving in the right direction for us.
Okay, and then I just also quickly wanted to touch on new technologies. So Dan, when you and I were speaking earlier this week, you mentioned that BYD may be coming out with a new blade technology, which could be a game changer for the space, and specifically in the LFP market. Did you want to maybe just talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, maybe I will actually, but maybe just a bit of background. I mean, most of the lithium-ion batteries that are used in electric vehicles today, or even power tools or something like that, are kind of off-the-shelf designs. They're cylindrical cells, or they're pouches and packages. And actually, I had a little prop I was going to throw up here, and I don't know if I have it with me. Yeah, I do. So there's a cylindrical cell. This is be typically at some point. This is what was being used in a Tesla vehicle. With 6,000 of these things all strapped together into a big box and put under the drivers and passenger seats, and that's what powers the car. This battery, the configuration of this battery was never really designed to be put in a car. It's just a cylindrical cell. It's not really much different. Tesla built around that by saying, okay, well, we're going to build this big package. What BYD has done, and traditionally what a lot of the consumer electric companies have done, like Apple or Samsung, they've gone and redesigned the cell, the actual cell. It's no longer a cylindrical thing like this. It's something that fits perfectly within their framework, in the laptop, in the phone. And now we're starting to see some of the auto manufacturers like BYD redesigning the cell to fit in their car. So they've taken this thing, which is just a big rolled up ribbon. It's rolled up into a jelly roll and stuffed into this can. And what BYD is, they've unraveled it all and made a one big, long, ski-shaped battery out of it that actually bridges the width of the car. And then they've taken a whole bunch of those things, put them all together to build this really big box of a battery that fits into the car. So it's structurally integral to the vehicle, and it eliminates all of the additional structure that you would have to make these support these under the car. And what it does, it leverages not only the new structure of the battery, but it also leverages lithium iron phosphate, which is the technology that they use in their batteries, because it's the cheapest, lowest cost, and it's the least sensitive to heat. So it's the least likely to catch fire. So you can pack all these batteries really, really closely together without them overheating. And it's uniquely possible to do this with lithium iron phosphate. And that's why it's a game changer, because all of a sudden it makes these materials that would have been used in electric buses and industrial applications much more applicable to long-range luxury electric vehicles. So we can start to see safer materials, longer lasting materials, and a much more uniquely designed battery kind of coming to the consumer level in the car. Remains to be seen if they can pull it all off. They just announced it, but it's certainly a very, very promising piece of technology. Hope that explains it.
Great. Okay, so I am going to jump to some of the audience Q&A. It looks like a lot of them are targeted for each company individually. So I'm just going to start. So the first one's for Bill. Do any of your solutions include waste heat recovery units?
Yeah, most of our solutions involve some form of waste heat recovery. So we are recovering anywhere where there's a hot air that's being exhausted to the atmosphere. If that hot air is hotter than the outside temperature, and in theory, there's energy there that we can recover. So more often than not, we're capturing the heat from a natural gas-fired boiler, but it could be an oven exhaust, it could be a dryer exhaust. Anywhere where there's hot air, we can take that hot air, use it to heat out hot water, and give the hot water back to the client.
Okay. So Audrey, is there any ability to sell 450,000 tons of Mexican CO2 reduction on behalf of your client with a merchant fee to you for recurring revenue and potential selling price of the credits into Europe?
Definitely. That is a big market opportunity. So we've been approached by a couple of sellers, because in Europe with the transportation standards, no one can meet them, but they're allowed in the next couple of years to come and purchase offsets that were generated in the upstream oil and gas industry. So what's interesting in Europe, so the way that Europe's divided, it's a EU directive to meet this transportation standard, but the way it's set up is it's Germany and the rest of Europe. So in the rest of Europe, we have an opportunity to actually go back as far back as 2011 is my understanding, and quantify the offsets. In Germany, you've got to pre-approve those projects moving forward. So the difference is around 11 euros a ton for the rest of Europe, and for Germany, they're willing to pay 100 euros a ton. So as I mentioned, we're generating them at less than $2 a ton. There's certainly an opportunity that's quite significant from a revenue stream point of view. So we are working on that right now. And certainly our ISO certification that we just received initially is one step. We're also working on a data system that allows us to measure and quantify in a very credible way so that we can trade these emissions. But yeah, we're working on that right now, and see a great opportunity to help our clients also monetize these offsets.
And so then the next question for you, Audrey, would be, can you describe the payback period to the client? It looks like it's less than 3 months.
In many of our applications it is, and certainly if we can monetize these assets, our payback becomes even shorter. The two examples I gave with our rental pool, both for Colorado and North Dakota, the payback is less than a couple of days actually. Especially with our rental model. We have a strong balance sheet, we have no debt, we have cash in the bank. So through these downturns in the oil and gas industry, our rental business becomes a very strong value proposition for our clients.
Okay, this question's for Dan. So clean tech is usually associated with climate change and sustainability. How does Nano One reconcile the sustainability factor when you guys are depending on quite a scarce resource, lithium?
Okay, so there's no sort of industrial clean technology that doesn't require some kind of materials in it, first of all, so we're all going to need to build our things out of something. Lithium itself is actually quite a plentiful source on Earth, but it's our ability to convert it into a usable chemical that are limited at this point, and the deployment of capital into mining and conversion of those mined lithium sources into usable chemicals will develop over time. And I think one of the key things to remember here is that lithium is not getting consumed in the battery; it's simply moving back and forth as you charge the battery, and it's completely recyclable. So as we put lithium into large-scale batteries in cars and other areas, those materials will be recyclable as the stockpile of used-up batteries starts to build up. We will begin to recycle those, and they will begin to be put back into the basically into the whole life chain of lithium-ion batteries. So it's quite a sustainable process once the critical mass of used batteries is out there. So hope that kind of answers the question.
Okay. Another one for Bill. So as you're dealing with large multinationals and they become increasingly convinced to install your solutions at multiple sites, do you have an average backlog value that you would be able to share?
Yeah, we share our backlog every quarter. So we talk about what our backlog is at the end of that quarter. But we typically do not have a long backlog. A big chunk of our business is delivered usually within 6 months of getting the order. So there's not usually a very large backlog. Certainly, 6 months to 18 months would be all the backlog would normally be. And at the end, the last quarterly reporting, I think we reported $8 million in backlog. Order backlog. So those are orders in that we haven't yet fulfilled.
So a few more questions going back to the COVID-19 theme. Barry, so one for you. So just talking about HVAC systems have been accused of maybe distributing COVID-19. So will you have to retrofit your product at all to include better filtration or UV light sterilization?
That's actually a really good question. So, the science is a little unclear about the impact of filtration or even UV light in being able to combat the presence of COVID-19 in buildings. One thing is clear, though. So the challenge that I think we're seeing in a lot of these buildings is that there isn't adequate fresh air and air circulation in these buildings. So the way in which indoor air quality sensors and what we're doing is also helping kind of manage that ventilation through the use of AI, is look for opportunities where we can drive fresh air inside a building to essentially make sure that we're not just circulating stale air, which is part of the reason why the level of airborne contaminants can be higher inside a building. So that's kind of the key here. So filtration may help, certainly doesn't hurt, but the key here is making sure that there's adequate ventilation and airflow inside the building.
Okay. And then another question that's really just directed to all of you guys. If you guys could speak just a little bit about the impact on your own business that you've seen from COVID-19. Maybe if we just quickly run through each of you. I don't know, Barry, you want to start?
Yeah, I would say for us, business is moving at a pretty fast clip. From our perspective, we're really, really proud of the fact that we have the opportunity to be part of the solutions. So in terms of restricting our firm's growth and innovation, we're continuously innovating, and in some ways, not just from a technology point of view, but also how we can take technology out. Now that digital technologies and remote connectivity are some of the ways in which these businesses have to operate. So it's kind of not a nice to have, it is a must have. And there are other aspects of our business, especially ones where we're deploying mobile connected worker technologies in facilities like oil and gas, where customers are telling us, hey, I can't travel to go and visit my sites, or I can't get subject matter experts out to where I need them. These kinds of technologies are now providing the basis for being able to get out in front of these customers with these technologies that kind of used to be longer term, which are now immediate needs. So from that perspective, we really see kind of a bright future kind of going forward over the next little while for us.
Audrey?
So, majority of our work is oil and gas, so we have seen, a bit of retrenching with that group, but we're also starting to expand and build on some of the sales we've made into other industries like wastewater treatment, landfills. We're using this, we've got a strong balance sheet, we've got cash in the bank, so we're using this time to continue to build our digital platform, which will help us quantify emissions before and after. We're continuing to be fairly active in the States because some of them have put in even tougher rules. So yes, we've had some impact, but we're certainly seeing opportunities in other areas, so Mexico and globally as well.
Bill?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we do is on site. I mentioned we do custom engineered turnkey solutions. So maybe 2/3 of our business is on site turnkey solutions. So that part of the business has slowed down temporarily. The other side continues to grow. But we've got a lot of really keen young engineers that we've hired over the last little while that with some of the projects slowing down, it's a unique opportunity for us to do a lot of things that we've been wanting to do for the last quite a while. It's updating our systems, it's developing new products, it's doing R&D, it's training our guys. So we have a full slate. We've got all our staff. We're keeping everybody fully engaged as we get through this. We were lucky in that we entered this period probably in the strongest position we have ever been in. Good, strong, solid cash flow, cash balances. And none of our customers yet, all the projects we have been working on, have canceled any projects. So there has been some delays, but we expect when things start to open up, and quite frankly, we're starting to see that now. Customers that didn't want us on site a couple of weeks ago are now talking about having us on site. We think we're going to be, busier than ever, but it remains to be seen. This is unprecedented territory we're in. So I don't know if anybody really knows what's going to happen when all this is over.
Dan?
Yeah, you know what? The COVID situation has largely we're largely unaffected by it. As many of your listeners will know, we closed the financing the day before the markets fell apart in February to the tune of $11 million. That unlocked $4 million non-dilutive money from the Canadian government. The BC government just chipped in $3 million. We announced that yesterday. So we're in a very financially healthy situation right now coming into this. Our business doesn't rely on the movement of people, goods, or revenues because we're pre-revenue. So we're largely disaster-proofed as we go through this. Really, the only impact is some of the laboratories where we're testing materials at our partner facilities have slowed down. But that's allowed us, as Bill was saying, to retrench a little bit and improve some systems within. All our employees are working full-time and contributing quite actively. So we're very optimistic about where we are right now and very excited about what's to come even in the next few months, still under COVID measures. So it's all working out very well for us so far.
Ron?
Well, we had a great Q1 financially. We're quite stable. Typically this time of year in Canada, we're under breakup anyways from the oil and gas industry. So all of our Canadian projects are municipality related, and in Alberta, those projects haven't been affected by COVID to this point. Our projects in the Permian, we have we're working for a couple super majors, and those projects are still on. Some of them are still operating, and a few of them got pushed out as far as timing goes. But at this point in time, we haven't seen any real negative effects outside of our normal standard seasonal activity.
Okay, Barry, there's a few questions kind of along these lines for you. So I'm going to try to summarize them into one, but just your adoption rates right now, given COVID, have they slowed down at all? Do you physically go to buildings to connect the assets? And then also a follow-up question to that, how long does it typically take you guys to connect a building between the contract sign and getting it up and running, and then being able to analyze the data and bring it into your grid?
Sure. There are a bunch of questions to unpack there. So let me see if I can.
Yeah, there's a lot.
One at a time. Just in terms of the growth of our business, we've seen pretty consistent, regular uptake of our solutions across the board. And so, and I think we put out a press release just a week or so ago where we were talking about the fact that in the first quarter of this year, we saw kind of 18% growth in total connected assets for mCloud. So moving from 41,000 to 48,000 over the course of 3 months. So I think that already says a great deal about the trajectory that we're on. In terms of the, how quickly we can go and get connected into buildings, yeah, normally it's kind of a very click and repeat kind of process for us. Our ability to go into a building is actually pretty straightforward. There's minimal hardware that needs to be installed. A lot of the actual configuration is done in our back office, so it's all done through software. So to bring customers online is really, really quick. And getting them onboarded is, a simple matter of kind of bringing in the networking hardware, switching it on, getting it connected to the right assets, and then getting our team set up so that way we can monitor their sites 24/7. So that's kind of the basic outlay of the story in terms of how we get connected to buildings across the board.
Hey, Ron, a question for you. How long has Aureus been around for? How much revenue is the company generating? And do you have any plans to go public near term?
Aureus has been around privately for 10 years. It was a fairly small company located in Grand Prairie, Alberta, focused on the Montney. In the last 2 years, we've expanded to the US and other parts of Alberta and BC. Aureus's revenue last year was a little over $40 million. We had a record Q1, and before the effects of COVID and the collapse of oil prices, we were expecting to grow at least 50% this year in revenue. A lot of those projects were secured, and so uncertain as to the timing of some of those projects, as I mentioned. So I'm not sure how that's going to impact revenue this year, but at this point in time, no plans to go public. Although we did raise a little bit of money here in Q1, a little over $5 million privately. So although there's no immediate plans to go public, there may be investment opportunities in the near future.
Okay, Dan, a question for you. So it looks like Jeffrey Dunn recently put out a report stating that they found a new single crystal coating for the NMC 811 batteries that had higher energy densities and cyclability than the NMC 532 batteries. What is differentiating your process other than your single pot coating process? And are there any new partnerships such as Tesla and Panasonic brewing?
Well, I'll answer the one that's far less difficult to unpack. That's the second question first.
It could have been my reading of the question.
listen, it answers a question that's above. I've been reading the questions ahead of time. So listen, our success with Volkswagen and our success with a number of our other partners has led to a whole bunch of different relationships that include many of Volkswagen's peers and many of the battery, chemical, and materials companies in the automotive and the battery supply chain. So we're actively working with a whole bunch of people there, and we're working hard to put formative relationships together that we can announce. Of course, I can't speak specifically about Panasonic or Tesla on a forum like this, but yeah, we're hoping to bring many more partnerships to the table. That's the easy question to answer. The second one about Jeff Dawn's technology is just a little harder to unpack because of all the technology in it. Essentially, Jeffrey Dawn is a very important researcher out of Dalhousie University, and he's working under funding from Tesla. and has been doing so for a few years. His focus is on electrolytes. Electrolyte is the liquid that goes in the battery that connects the two electrodes. So you have these sheets of materials, graphite on one side and lithium and cobalt on the other, and they all get connected with a liquid electrolyte. Jeffrey Don has been working on ways to improve that electrolyte. And he uses, basically he did a study for 3 years to prove that if he used what's called single crystal cathode, and that's one of the electrodes, with one of his novel electrolytes, he can make a longer lasting, more durable battery. And that research came out in August last year. Really around the same time, we were able to acquire a patent in North America, and we also have a similar one in Taiwan that describes a single crystal cathode technology that leads to really the same kind of response. This would be a material that lasts longer and is more durable. And it answers another one of the questions you have above. With a more durable cathode material, we can make batteries that charge faster and that drive further, simply because there's less constraint on the battery. And ultimately that will lead to lower costs and sort of more efficiency in the batteries. And where we differ from the materials that Jeffrey Don was using. Now, these aren't Jeff Don's materials. He acquired them from somewhere in China. But where we differ from them is ours are, first of all, they're manufacturable, they're low cost, and our process enables the coating of these materials in one single step, which makes them commercially viable, as opposed to the materials he's been using, which are largely at a research and non-commercially viable level. So that's kind of really where we differentiate, and we have patents now in 2 very important districts in the world, and they will be, hopefully we'll start to see issuance of patents in other areas. And that adds to 16 patents that we already have around the world in a variety of different areas. It's a difficult question to answer in this kind of a framework, but hopefully I helped to address that to some degree.
Okay, I think that kind of helps address the question that was above too.
Yeah.
I'm just reading. So has the partnership with Volkswagen sped up relationships with other potential partners?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I actually tried to answer all of those questions.
Together, thanks. Audrey, a question for you. How much do you expect to spend on your digital platform, and how long until a beta version is ready? Has COVID slowed your work with MIT on your digital platform at all?
So it hasn't, and we're really developing the digital platform in partnership. So one of our partners, for example, is SAIT, or Southern Alberta Institute. They're very strong on drones. And you'll probably see in the last little while a lot of announcements on drone companies flying around and detecting methane, similarly on the satellite. So hasn't slowed us down. If anything, the work is actually accelerating. There's lots of announcements coming out on how bad the Permian is and how much methane's escaping. So not looking to, we'll have a small capital expenditure, not significant this year. We've got some support in terms of government funding, but we're building as a consortium. The other consortium partners are Guild One on blockchain. We've got some partners on AI. And of course, last year we spent a lot on just putting in our SCADA system so we could monitor our units around the world.
And then upon completion of your digital platform, would you license it to others, non-competitors?
No, our intent is really to transition into becoming a company that is able to supply data to our clients to confirm that they are a zero emission site, that they've reduced a certain amount of emissions, and really start to provide a service that allows our, that helps our clients demonstrate a before and an after, and then with drone technology be able to demonstrate daily that site is a zero emission. So we're looking to have a subscription licensing type of arrangement with our clients.
Okay, so we just have a few more questions I'm going to quickly get through. Barry, would you be able to talk about what percentage of your trailing revenues are recurring?
Well, I think those will be pretty clearly stated in our public filings. I think in terms of specific percentage, I don't have an exact number, more than half.
Okay. And then would you maybe, I'm not sure which one of you wants to take this one, but someone just be able to comment on, so clean tech businesses have benefited from large subsidies and grants by governments. how do you think changes over the near and the medium term? One of you wants to?
I'll jump in because we operate in Europe, we operate in North America, so every country is different. And we saw a real change after the Paris Agreement in November 2015. So there's been more, whether it's carbon pricing, whether it's cap and trade, whether it's subsidies, there's been more and more around the world universally, and that has continued to grow. The interesting thing will be what happens after this, and I have been recently seeing more and more government and non-governmental bodies worldwide, the UN, International Energy Agency, the German government, talking about whatever stimulus packages come after COVID-19, they should be tied to green technologies or green jobs or improving the environment, because the next crisis that the world goes through could be even much worse. So I'm optimistic, but having said that, a lot of our business isn't reliant on those sort of subsidies. We pay for ourselves with the fuel price where it is right now. But I'm optimistic that it's going to, the environment is going to improve further eventually.
Victoria, if I can just add to what Bill said. So certainly we're starting to see a big focus on ESG. All of our clients have targets or goals that they're setting around it. I chaired the federal government strategy table on clean tech last year, and some of the feedback our table gave to them was there's a lot of focus on the early stage and R&D, and what we're saying is, start to look at the scale up and focus on the companies that truly have products and help them grow internationally to help support the Canadian economy. So I think the $750 million, for example, that was allocated for methane is really a move to push more adoption that actually helps us demonstrate as Canada that we are reducing emissions. So lots of focus on ESG, and I think the capital is going to continue to flow into that space. I wanted to say for Questor, we've actually grown from cash flow. We've been around for 25 years, and our growth hasn't come from government money. I think as I chaired the federal government strategy table, governments sometimes aren't good at picking what technologies to invest in.
Yeah, maybe I can jump on top of that. Obviously the ESG sentiment was taking off in early in 2020, and we all got a really good taste of that. I think it's here to stay, to tell you the truth, and it's going to be playing out for the foreseeable future. When we get through COVID and the economy starts to come back together, we're going to see European governments, North American governments, governments around the world hitting the infrastructure button, particularly in North America, and I think that's going to benefit everyone that's on this panel here. That infrastructure button is going to be really important. It's going to be about bringing some industry back to North America. It's going to be about rebuilding infrastructure that's going to affect power, energy storage, energy generation, the whole works. And that'll be backed, I think, largely by the ESG money, all the money that's parked in all these massive funds to change this infrastructure. In Asia, it's going to be more about production. They're going to hit the production button, manufacturing button, and again, that's going to have a really big impact for us. Batteries play out very heavily in China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan. So to us, that's going to be really important. And then you layer on top of that the fact that everyone over the last few months has got a glimpse of blue skies and clean air, and I don't think that's going to fade for a very long time. So the governments are going to have to reconcile with that, and they're going to have to invest to try and clean up air, even in places that weren't thinking about it before. So to me, that's going to be a very important role, again, to everything that we're doing on this panel.
So if I could maybe close the discussion with just an open question to all of the panelists. So it seems like ESG and clean tech continues to be a growing trend in Canadian investment. However, when looking at all of your stocks, they still seem to be largely undervalued. So why do you think Canadian investors are behind on this front, and what can we do to change that? And then along those lines, do you think there's a misconception when talking about clean tech that companies are early stage startups versus profitable scale-ups? So whoever wants to start with that one.
Yes. Yes, I think a lot are. I think there is a misconception. I think a lot of the air in the room or the money in the room historically for the last year or so has been, certainly with smaller companies, have been taken up by cannabis and Bitcoin. You know, that story is perhaps over now, and so we're starting to see the benefit from that. So, you know, I'm optimistic, but yes, there is a misconception that clean tech means early stage. And you know, there's a lot of us here that aren't early stage at all. There's some of us that have, you know, grown with our own resources for the last 10 years, good growth rates and profitable companies. You know, we have the technology to significantly reduce our carbon emissions right now. We just need to use that technology more broadly.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to add on that?
Yeah, I think, yes, there was a lot of focus, and then there is a misconception that clean tech is early stage and we've got to invent the solution. I think the conversation's starting to change, and investors are realizing there's lots of companies that have strong balance sheets in clean tech, cash in the bank, earnings per share, and for Questor, I mean, we've generated a return on capital over 35% consistently. You know, great return on investment, 23 cents earnings per share, no debt. So, you know, we tend to invest a lot in you know, the flavor of the month, but I think these days investors are coming back to the basics, and I think there's an opportunity for companies that really show that they've been around and do have strong returns on capital.
Okay, so I'm going to close it there. We're a little bit over time. I want to thank each of the panelists for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And for everyone who's logged on, if anyone has a question that they think of later or that they didn't get answered, you can email us at info@adcap.ca and we can get you in touch. Or if anyone wants a longer conversation with one of the management teams, again, info@adcap.ca, and we can put you in touch with them. Or if anyone wants an investor presentation or whatnot. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thank you again to all the panelists.